Let's talk to David Paul. He's the Managing Director of VectorVest UK. Very good morning and happy Christmas to you, David.
Good morning, Mus. Yes.
Right, so we have a number of slides. The first one caught my attention. Has the year-end rally started? Statistically, we normally have a Santa rally. I don't think we're going to have one this year.
Okay, well, if it does start, it normally starts about the 15th. The 15th of December, and we're close to that now. The technical position of the UK market is starting to look a little better. It's still in a mega oversold situation, but in the next slide I've in fact charted the VectorVest composite of the UK, and the window at the top of the slide is the price of the VectorVest composite, which is an equally weighted index of the 2,200 shares that we follow on the UK markets. Now down below is our market timing indicator, which is a composite measure of both the momentum of the price of the composite and the buy-sell ratio, our VectorVest proprietary metric, which measures the breadth of the market. And you can see that the price is making falling lows, but the indicator is in fact making rising lows, and that's what technical analysts refer to as compound normal divergence. And that divergence, I counted them yesterday, has occurred over 42 bars, so it's starting to become quite a significant divergence. It's the most positive thing that I've seen in the UK market since the sell-off, which started on the 5th of October. We're still, the short-term trend is still down, the longer-term trend is still down. We're in a mega oversold situation based on both the momentum and the buy-sell ratio, but that bullish normal divergence is reasonably positive, so that adds to the technical picture for a little bit of a bounce. But as we go into the trading day, I see the market's up 20 or 30 ticks this morning. As we go into the trading day, all our trends, reality, it's still down.
Yes, indeed. Okay, well, let's move on to the next slide. FTSE 100, again, similar picture.
Yeah, same thing. It's showing that the prices are, the last little drop-off that happened fairly savagely on Friday. I put a standard MACD indicator below the price on the FTSE, and the price made a falling low. The MACD made a rising low, and an MACD normal divergence, quite a strong event. So that adds again to the technical picture. Wall Street was up a little bit, had quite an interesting day yesterday in that it gapped up, then came back and filled the gap, and it come back to 61% retracement of the last range, and then moved up for the rest of the day. One hell of a lot of points in the day if you take all the ups and the downs. So I think the probabilities for a decent bounce towards the end of this week, start of next week, look higher than they've been for a long time.
Understood. Okay, well, let's move on to the USA.
Well, the US had quite a strong day and sitting on major support there. The technical picture is also showing bullish divergence. I haven't put the market timing indicator in there, but clearly that's incredibly important levels there, and if those levels were to go, there's a great deal of fresh air, so it needs to do something quite emphatic today at those levels.
Understood. Okay, well, you've got three stocks now that you wanted to highlight. Let's kick off first one, Mnemonic MLNX.
Well, this is an American stock, and I put it up because it's our top stock by value, safety and trend. So every day VectorVest puts a valuation to every share in both the London and New York. It puts a number to the safety of the earnings, it puts a number to the trend, and then the founder of VectorVest put those numbers together into our master indicator called VST. And if you want to try and find certainly short-term trading opportunities or spread betting opportunities, then you really don't have to look at many more shares than the first 20 or 30 by VST. Now, on this particular chart, you can see that in the window below the price, earnings per share is rising strongly.
Yeah.
And because of that, during the course of the year, the green line in the window, same window as price, the green line has shot up the page, and that was the VectorVest algorithm revaluing the stock. So as we go into the trading day today, we've got a stock that's significantly undervalued, that's growing earnings strongly, and that's a good place to look for a trade. In the next slide, I've traded it a couple of times. I put this on because I thought Zach was going to be here, and he loves this particular setup. But the market pulled back to a 78% retracement of the last range. 78% is a Fibonacci level. And whether you believe Fibonacci is self-fulfilling or whether you believe it's sent down by the creator, we can argue about for a very long time. But nevertheless, markets respect those levels. And that thick blue line of mine is a 78% retracement. Now, it found support there, and then it gapped through that little trend line. And if you see a gap through a trend line, I think that's what Zach calls the rocket launcher. And in a share that's undervalued, that's growing earnings strongly, where you see a gap through a trend line, you really
sign of buying strength.
Yeah, you really don't need much more than that to make a good living as a short-term trader. I think what you do need, in addition to that, is the discipline to sit and do nothing and wait for them to come around.
Easier said than done.
Well, quite so. Doing nothing is much more difficult than it would seem, for sure. It's pulled back a little bit now. It pulled back in 3 waves, and I reckon the share, if the general market in the US turns up, that share is going to move strongly. On the front page of VectorVest for short-term traders, we have a simple dial. Red, don't buy. Green, buy undervalued shares that are rising in price at this time. So if anybody wants to be a short-term trader or spread better, then you really don't have to look at much more than the top 20 or 30 stocks by VST. You then need to make sure that the general market is going the same way, and that little gauge on the front page of VectorVest tells you that automatically. And then all you need to do is to buy breakouts, and that works exceptionally well.
Okay, let's move on to polymetal.
Well, before we get to polymetal, last week I talked, while Zach was here, on 3 defensive stocks, and one of those, Molina Healthcare, MOH, looks exceptionally good today. It pulled back a little bit in the rout on Friday, but if that share were to break above $142 or whatever the high was last Thursday, I think, then I think that share is away. The general market needs to turn. That little gauge of ours needs to go into green, but Molina Healthcare looks good for a short-term move up the page. Undervalued, growing earnings strongly, but
Back to polymetal, that looks pretty bullish to me as well.
Well, every Monday afternoon, I do a session for the VectorVest customers. It lasts an hour, and we've been talking about gold shares for quite a long time. Now, that is polymetal, and the gold price itself, the bullion price, bottomed out at, again, a 78% retracement of the last weekly range, and it's making rising lows. Polymetal, at the same time as the gold price bottomed out, also bottomed out at that thick dotted line, which is 78% of that last range. That's a weekly chart over 3 years or 5 years, can't quite remember. It charted a double bottom there and is now moving up the page. Now, those people that understand harmonic relationships will see that we had a thrust up the page, and then we had a pullback in 3 waves. A little bit of imagination, you can see the 3 big waves there. And it's now breaking above that falling trend line, and it's kissed that falling trend line a few times. Now, the gold price, I think the seasonality of gold at this time of the year is normally very good. So I think that polymetal looks as if it can run from here and run quite strongly from here. Again, that's a long way from those defensive health stocks that I presented last Thursday when I was on your show with Zach. This is a gold mining company, and it will be, in fact, defined by whatever the bullion price does. And my experience in trading gold, which is over 30 years, is that it has a propensity to disappoint like nothing else on the planet.
Most difficult contract in the world. Okay, let's move on to Randgold.
Well, Randgold, of course, is not going to be around for much longer, although it's merging into Barrick. The chap who runs it, Mark, will be running the combined show. Again, it went up the page very strongly from that double bottom. It then pulled back in 3 waves. Again, it pulled back at to that 78% retracement, pushing up the page very strongly indeed. I've been speaking about it now since those lows at our Monday afternoon sessions. Again, I think that we just need to think about what's going to happen when the joint venture with Barrick lists.
Yep.
So maybe leave that one alone for the moment until that deal making is done. And the last one, of course, is a minnow, or a small miner,
Griffin mining.
Well, yes, the behavioral finance people have got a wonderful word for going back to a share that you've done exceptionally well, and I think it's a familiarity bias or some other word that they've put to it. Well, that was one of my best shares over the last 18 months, so I got all of that move up. I think every VectorVest client got that move up the page. In fact, when we first started talking about it, nobody had heard of Griffin mining. It's pulled back, and it's pulled back, in this case, to 61% of the last range, which is a confluence of that long-term trend line. So it's sitting on support. It's still too early to do anything. I put that's a weekly chart. I put up a weekly MACD, and the weekly MACD is showing a reverse divergence pattern. Some technical analysts call that a slingshot. It's still too early. We need to have a weekly close or a couple of weekly closes below that downsloping trend line that I've drawn. But with that in place, and if the gold price can do what I think it's going to do during the course of 2019, then I think that we're going to see another very strong run-up in Griffin mining. Produces both gold and zinc. And polymetal, of course, the first one we talked about, produces both gold and silver. The silver chart looking particularly good at the moment, but again, it can be a deceptive rascal.
Yes, indeed.
I think people, for defensive stocks, if they could have a look at the video that we posted on our blog from your show last week, and if they want some more aggressive short-term trades, some of those gold shares look quite good. To find your own fairly aggressive spread bet and short-term trading opportunities, you don't have to look at much more than the top 30 stocks by VST on both the UK market and the American market.
Understood. Right, let's wrap up with the important numbers. If you wanted to get in touch with David, his email address, david.paul@vectorvest.com. David, we run out of time. Happy Christmas to you and your family.
Merry Christmas to you, Mus. Thank you.